Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and we have the pleasure of talking about the offense tonight from that preseason win over the Eagles. A great showing by both sides of the ball here, but joining me to talk about the offense tonight is Nik Mehta. Nik, how you doing?
Doing great, Ken. Thanks so much for having me. Quite a start to the preseason, quite a start to the Jesse Minter era. It was really one of the things that stood out to me on both sides of the ball was how, and I can't find a better word for this, I've been trying to, is how competent everyone looked. Very assignment sound. Everyone knew what they were supposed to be doing on every play. And I thought that was just really, really encouraging off the bat.
Yeah, really evident. Certainly something that we've seen from McDonald's defense in 23 and 23, I would say 22 for some of the season. After they got
Yeah.
Roquan.
Yeah.
But in I would say last night it was terrific. It was a two-sided effort in terms of what they did. They won snap count 76-40. They did it on both sides of the ball, and they did it without any turnovers, which is frankly remarkable that they were able to throttle the Eagles the way they did through 55 minutes of the game, through the whole game in total, but through 55 minutes of the game even more so, with the 76-40 snap advantage.
Yeah, and I was expecting Minter and Keon Martin to be a little bit more upset about not getting the shutout at the post game presser. They didn't really show much emotion about it, but I think, like you said, for 55 minutes, I mean, the Eagles. There's all this talk about Sean Mannion, and I know it's the preseason and Hurts wasn't playing, and all the relevant caveats there, but just for Ravens fans to come in and see Jesse Minter be as advertised, a little bit more exotic than I was expecting. It wasn't all vanilla. He threw a couple of tricky play calls in there defensively, and just really enjoyed watching again, I got to find a better word, the competency, but the cohesion, I think, is the best way to put it, between all parts of the field and how organized the secondary was. I didn't really notice any major blown coverages or anything like that you would expect out of a preseason game. New play caller, new system, a lot of new young players in there. Just was just very, very impressed by Minter's impact on that game.
Yeah, I would agree. And go down further, you could probably put Mickens in that group too. I think that the fingerprints of the coaching staff were all over this game. I kind of want to save that for just a little bit later, but some great stuff there. Absolutely suffocating performance by the defense. Obviously, beautiful night. Gorgeous night to be at the park. And this doesn't always happen in the preseason. We've had some rain in recent years, and we've had other games where it's just been swelteringly hot. This was very tolerable weather-wise, and a beautiful night for football. It did take the offense a while to get rolling in this one. Once Tyler Huntley got out of the game, though, Fagnano and Reed were really on the mark all night.
Yeah, Fagnano was really impressive. And dating back to the spring, it's interesting that he was signed, obviously, alongside Diego Pavia, former Heisman winner, all the pomp and circumstance and headlines of him coming to Baltimore. And Fagnano was very quickly and very evidently the better quarterback between them. But that comparison is a very favorable comparison for Fagnano, right? Pavia is he just does not have anything near an NFL caliber arm. And so, yeah, when he's throwing next to Fagnano looks like a pro. Fagnano's been able to come in and actually establish himself and look like he belongs. And it's interesting. He's been okay in practice. He's been throwing interceptions as an undrafted rookie quarterback is going to do, but really stepping up to the plate and shining under the lights. I think the composure that he showed was probably the most impressive part, beyond the throws and some of the plays he made. I know we're going to get into that in more detail, but just from a bird's eye view, his ability to come in, run the offense. He had 29 dropbacks. He passed the ball, played more in general than I was expecting, and really just never looked like the lights were too bright for him. So I really commend him for that.
Yeah, I think there were other things I liked about Fagnano's game as well. That I think one of the big ones was, pocket presence was good. He moved around in the pocket a little bit to make himself some additional space. It's really sometimes hard to pull this apart from in a typical preseason game, because the trick plays that most offenses runs are all these tired old boot plays. They're always rolling out the quarterback, usually, zone block left, naked boot right, but they throw in one going the opposite direction because that's got to be extra tricky. And you end up with 6 or 7 or 8 of those plays in a single game. And it's just, they never run that many in the regular season, but they don't want to run other trick plays that really dig into their actual working capital of trick plays. They want to run these little crap trick plays anyway. So that's what they did a lot with him. He did a good job throwing on the move. I thought even more impressive was he stood in against pressure very well. So not only was the pocket presence there in terms of understanding where that pressure was coming from, but when he was going to take a hit, he went ahead and delivered a nice, accurate ball and then took the hit. It was very well done for him in the night.
Yeah, so, and the Ravens have tried a couple times in the Lamar Jackson era to develop find a young developmental QB3, and they've never even gotten to this point with one of them where they have a solid preseason game and you think, okay, here's something we can really work with. I'm not sure I ever felt that way about Leary. I really liked Leary like at the combine and like throws a great ball, but never felt really confident about his trajectory, or felt like he had even a starting point to grow from in Baltimore, where I was really like, okay, I could see this going somewhere. So I think Fagnano is really the first time we've seen that. And then Austin Reed, comes in this week, has the experience with Declan Doyle in, the past two off seasons, or just last off season with Chicago, excuse me. And all he's got to do is come in, close out the game, makes a couple plays. That scramble was great. I'm sure Lamar and Snoop are going crazy on the sidelines for that, and it brings a vibe and energy of the Ravens have kind of this offensive coaching staff that's really, really well built out and is full of combination of young guys. You've got guys like Israel Wolfork. Obviously, Doyle's really young, but then you've got Eddie Faulkner. You've got Joe Lombardi on this staff, two former offensive coordinators. I think there's at least one more. And so I was really excited to see how this staff came together. I thought Minter, Doyle, Weaver made a lot of really interesting choices in how they built the staff. And it's early, but you feel like some of it's already, you can see why they made some of those moves. And it's starting to, I don't want to say pay off, but you're starting to see some of the results.
You definitely see the fingerprints of the coaching staff on this game, and we've got a lot of talk about that as we get through the rest of the show. So let's put a pin in that one for right now. But I did think a great effort for the coaches. I thought the young receivers were as advertised, and we'll get into them individually as we walk through some of the position groups and we talk about individual players. We'll hit them on both places probably, but really great game for Walker, Surratt, and Lane on a combined basis. They did, the three of them had a fumble. Surratt had a fumble, obviously. But other than that, they went down to the ground to get the ball. Lane presented himself very well, and he didn't have to reach. He reached back for one ball, but he did do much. He did have to do much else outside the frame. He had a great game. So you got to be. I know there's a lot of wide receiver fanatics out there in Flock Nation who've been very disappointed over the years. This is a year. Start getting excited about our young players, and also I wouldn't make last night into a referendum about Rashad Bateman. Rashad Bateman is still the number 2 receiver, and that ain't changing, at least not immediately. And he's really been good in camp this year, as we've seen. We're not going to see him in the preseason for very good reasons. Mm-hmm. The word came out today, obviously, from Jesse Minter that it's going to be a very similar group of players in the second preseason game. So it's not going to change in the third preseason game. So I think this pretty well sets the mark that, the 20 or so guys that sat out for this game are going to take the whole preseason off.
Yeah, I agree. Going back to Bateman very quickly, he's talked in this training camp about getting different looks in the offense, getting looks out of the slot, which is something he really did not do at a high rate in the first several years of his career. I believe was among the lowest rates of getting usage out in the slot for those first several years of his career. And so that change is going to be really big to see his usage diversified. And, a guy who we've seen him get open on tape so many times, and it just has never felt like quite the right fit in his role in the offense. In Monken's offense, he's obviously very much a deep threat. And he felt, he said he felt one-dimensional in that respect. And so the fact that the Ravens have these guys, Lane and Walker and Surratt, emerging, to me is just, these are guys who are going to be able to take full advantage of the opportunities they get, of the fact of, defenses devoting their attention to Zay Flowers and Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson. And, Bateman and Andrews being the secondary targets, front in the passing game, they're still going to get plenty of attention from opposing defenses. And so what really Saturday said to me about the unit as a whole is that these guys are going to be able to really punish opposing defenses for not giving them enough attention and for giving them easy matchups.
Yeah, I would agree. I think there's the additional targets really showed up in a very positive way in terms of what got on. Well, let's look at some of the key position battles. I just want to start at the center because it's a place and one of the really two significant position battles. And by the way, I don't count the wide receiver 3 or 4 as a position battle. Those guys will both get tons of snaps. Center, it could be a 1 or 0 for somebody in terms of how many snaps they get the whole year. So anyway, Pinter started, played 15 snaps. He definitely got the starter's treatment. I don't think he played exceptionally well. A huge offensive holding flag really kind of marred the outing. Didn't do a bad job pass blocking. I'm not saying that. And there was some decent exchanges that went on in pass blocking, but he had 15 snaps he played.
Yeah, Pitcher's been in the lead since the spring for the center job, and a lot of that has been because of his experience and the my view on the center competition has always been slanted in favor of pass protection, knowing that the Ravens have such a solid run game. They have, two capable run blockers at guard, and obviously Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson in the backfield. Not that I don't care about the center's run blocking ability, but we all watched the Ravens play football the last 2 years, and we all know that pass blocking is really what did this team in offensively more than any other single thing. And so that's why Pinter has been a relatively steady pass blocker in his career, but he's been a backup. He's never been asked to go out and start an entire season and hold up in pass protection over an entire season. And so getting at this juncture in his career, he's 30 this year, I believe. And so you do wonder a little bit, like, is this guy going to be able to hold up the entire season? And the experience is great, but to me, it's not so much experience. And because it's a new offense, everyone is coming in at a certain level together, that it's not like a major overriding factor to me in what I want to see in this competition.
The guy who had a lot of experience coming in last year and ended up losing his job was Joe Noteboom. And he lost his job to Carson Vincent by the end of the year. He wasn't even on the game day roster. Vincent was ahead of him. Continuing back on the center group, though, Posick, everybody's expecting him to take the job, or a lot of people are. Certainly, the Ravens brought him in. He's got a ton of experience. This is his 10th NFL season. And he played the last 14 snaps of this game. 2 drives. He was fine. He had a really violent pancake on the final real snap that was past the echo of the whistle. I mean, it was almost a cheap shot, frankly, at that point. He was driving the guy to the ground. But it was, I mean, you got to take into account the game situation to a little bit at that point. It's probably not put the guy on the ground. After you've just gotten the first down that guarantees you can kneel it out in 2 more plays. I mean, there's no need to do it. But Posick doesn't really seem to be ready based on his usage more than his actual play.
Clearly, he was just excited to be back out on a football field. So that I don't blame him for. But yeah, Posick played 14 snaps. Pinter played 15. And you just listen to how we're talking about them right now. They were fine. They didn't embarrass themselves. They didn't have any horrific plays. Pinter had the holding that ended the Ravens' second drive. Posick wasn't exposed horribly. That the pancake after the whistle doesn't really mean a whole lot. So Ken, you and I have had this conversation, I think, a couple of times this year about there is an extent to which the Ravens just need a baseline of serviceable center play, league average center play in this offense. And that, that stability is really what they need more than anything else. This is not a diss on Tyler Linderbaum, but Tyler Linderbaum is a plus potential, a guy who can really add things to your offense as a center. Barring that, and I don't want to get too much into the numbers and stuff here, but barring that, just in terms of your resource allocation, getting a serviceable center is for the money that they're paying them is really where they need to be for really any of the guys who could win the starting job this year. That is, to me, the higher priority than what can I go do with this guy as a blocker the way that they could with Linderbaum.
It's literally an 80% of the player at 20% of the price situation with Tyler Linderbaum. They have a $6 million invested in the position, I believe, among those 3 guys. And, Linderbaum's 27. And it's a 27 AAV over 3 years. It's just no small commitment. It's a multi-year commitment. And Linderbaum is just an average, league average pass blocker, maybe a little bit above, depending on what you look at. But his penalties were very serious. He's you got to really value run blocking over pass blocking. Yeah, I've heard you say it, but this is something I've preached for many years is the relative importance of pass blocking, run blocking is higher at any position. And PFF has kind of, in my opinion, led people down the wrong path by overweighting run blocking relative to pass blocking at the two interior positions. So anyway, it is what it is. But the guy we haven't talked about and we left for last is Javon Gwynn. Now, I want to do this. I want to leave this for the top of the second show. So we're gonna split this into 2 episodes. We'll go into some real detail on Gwynn, but qualitatively, outstanding effort from Gwynn and just completely different look from what I expected. The guy's a fire hydrant in terms of movability as a pass blocker, which I completely did not expect. I expect that to be the problem. Very violent. Can placement is outstanding. Positions his feet very well. Just qualitatively, outstanding effort from him. And I'll get into some of the scoring metrics in the second part.
Yeah, I was super, super impressed. And listen, folks, listen to how Ken is talking about Javon Gwynn compared to how we were just talking about Ethan Posick and Danny Pinter. This is actually was an exciting night to watch from the young guy. I know that I know that you have mentioned multiple times in the show, Dwayne Ledford, Ravens offensive line coach, brings him up from Atlanta. And I know for you, Ken, that was a big sign that this might be a legit competition for the center job. If Ledford is bringing this guy with him, and the Ravens have, in some ways, handed Ledford the keys to the castle, especially with that offensive line, what can he come out and show? And early in camp, and it's hard to see in camp, pads, no pads, contact, no contact, etc. It's really hard for these guys to stand out in camp. And so in the back of your head, you're like, okay, well, Pinter, Posick, they've got the experience, and you feel like they're in the lead. And then you watch Javon Gwynn play, and you're like, that is a guy that's fighting for a starting job. That's a guy who's fighting to be a starter in the National Football League. And, again, this isn't meant to be a knock on Pinter and Posick, but I didn't see like that fire out of them in the same way. Gwynn climbing to the second level was gorgeous last night. So some of the blocks he was able to hit, I was just so impressed by his ability to navigate in space. And, I just was not even expecting to be raving about any one of these three guys after this first game. And to me, Gwynn really came in my opinion, has stolen this thing out from the other two veterans, but we'll see if the Ravens agree.
Yeah, and it's obviously we should start seeing indications of that. But I'll just finish with this for the first show. We're going to talk about Javon Gwynn for probably 15 minutes in the second show, is my guess. But if after this game, Javon Gwynn does not have some elevation of role, responsibility, live fire usage in the Vikings practices, whatever it might be, if there's not an elevation, a further desire to see more of what this guy could do against the top level of competition available this time of year, then it was never a three-way competition to begin with. They were just BSing us the whole way. I mean, this is the one guy outplayed the other two by such a ginormous margin. You have to take that seriously, unless you'd already made up your mind. And I don't know why you wouldn't be willing to change it after seeing that game. So we'll talk more.
What you're describing is the John Harbaugh approach to guard competitions. And so it would be really, really interesting to see if Gwynn, if what you're describing is the case, that Gwynn never really had a legitimate shot and the team isn't responding to what they see out on the practice field, and really even more importantly in preseason, because for so many years John would be talking about, oh yeah, this guy's in the mix for the starting competition, this guy's in the mix, but Daniel Falele, start to finish, wire to wire for 2 seasons in a row, and nary a cent of competition those years, real competition those years, despite what Harbaugh said. So, I have to say optimistic, just based on everything we've gotten from Minter, from Doyle, from Ledford, that this is not going to be one of those situations.
Right. I certainly hope you're right. Well, let's move on. One thing I'd like to talk about this time of year is order of entry. So I thought we'd go through, we could have a few comments of the players, and you can leave some players out because you have a second chance to come back to them in part 2 of the show. So I'll just toss that out there for starters, Nick. But at QB, we didn't really have any surprises. Huntley was up for 2 series. Then we saw Fagnano, and he got most of the rest of the game. And then Reed had 1 drive plus the kneel down drive effectively to play. Fagnano obviously got the quality, juicy middle of the game in much the same way that Javon Gwynn did. In fact, maybe you can even map it that Fagnano got to play with Javon Gwynn. And so he had a really good game from that perspective, but he certainly did a fine job. And then I'm very impressed with Austin Reed in the drive he had. A couple of on-target throws. He lost another throw that Cornelius Johnson dropped. Just a fine game, I thought, from Reed as well.
I believe you are right about Fagnano and Gwynn playing the same 51 snaps, and with Huntley, Huntley's such a gamer. He's kind of always better when he's got to get thrown into a game than to me than when he's, I guess, preparing for one. He's just that kind of player. He's always been in my eyes. Fagnano, this is a consequence of the Skylar Thompson IR placement. Obviously, I think the Ravens were probably more looking at him to be their QB3 this year. Um, could have created a bit of a roster decision, whether it's 53 man or practice squad. And then he gets injured. They bring in Austin Reed, but again, Reed is just coming in. He has not been with the team, but has not been building chemistry and all those things. And so Fagnano really just had to take on a lot. And I think that was not that it's hard. Guys who are competing for roster spots are trying to stay in the mentality of always being prepared, always being ready to go. That is still a sizable portion of snaps and responsibilities that he was handed. And when you think about, in a weird way, when you think about one of the key goals of the Ravens on Saturday night was to highlight and see what they could get out of these rookie pass catchers, that then does put quite a bit on the quarterbacks to put those pass catchers in positions to make plays and show what they can do. And so that was also, I think, a really nice part about Fagnano's performance in the meat of that game, is being able to spread the ball out and hit the rookie guys and kind of let everyone get a chance to show what they did.
Yeah, he did. He certainly had a chance, and some of the lesser receivers ended up playing with Reed at the end of the game. So Fagnano certainly got a good opportunity to play with the big three in this game. Let's just open the box here and take a brief look inside here in 20 seconds or less. Does Fagnano make this team as a third quarterback within the 53, or is he at the top of the practice squad?
Top of the practice squad for me. I just going undrafted, and teams get their QB3 set and they want them during training camp. It's really uncommon that they would pluck him off the practice squad for their 53 as an undrafted rookie QB. Just would not be what you typically see. I would take the risk.
Right. I would take the risk as well. As rosters start to attrit, I think Fagnano, if he were to have another game like this, would be a player that other teams would look at. There may be some other teams that scouted him and may have liked him. The Ravens certainly got him, and I don't know. I think it's possible he could be gone before the end of the year when you get 8 or 10 quarterback injuries into the season, including backups.
Yeah, and then there's always opportunities to promote him to the 53. I don't believe he has any guaranteed money, so that tells me he really didn't have a ton of interest, or doesn't have much guaranteed money. So it tells me he doesn't have a ton of interest coming out as an undrafted guy.
I'd be surprised if he has anything but his UDFA signing bonus. I'd really be surprised. But I mean, that's just the nature of UDFA.
No, and it's a small signing bonus too, is what I'm saying. Like it's pretty minimal. So.
All right, let's move on to the running backs. They rested Henry, Hill. Ali was injured for the game. Ali's status got a little murkier with Minter's comments today at the podium.
Yeah, and the Ravens signing Jonathan Ward on Sunday as well to their, a guy who was on the practice squad briefly last year. So he said, I forget exactly what he said, that he was working through, so very vague about Ali, didn't really give any details. And so we'll have to see if Ali even suits up at all this week, for example. And that could be a real issue for him making this roster.
Yeah, he is right on the bubble, and the Ravens, Fagnano would be one example, but the Ravens may also want to keep a 10th offensive lineman, say. So those are possibilities. And there are people, including a bet I have with Voss going on, that say this is the year that it'll be 26-24 defense. I was happy to.
Can I get in on Voss's side on that?
I laid 3-1. Voss's side, he thinks 26 defenders.
Yeah, I'm with Voss.
Ooh. All right.
Yeah, sorry. I've been on this boat for about a week, I think. Yeah.
$20 even up?
You got it.
Okay. So we're $20 at even money here. Let's do that. And then that'll be all the witnesses are on air here. That's great. All right. So anyway, Randall saw time. He was the first in. Then we saw Tolliver and then McMillan. They all were very similar in terms of running the ball. They all had some decent gains as the game went on. And they all did a pretty crappy job of pass blocking. Tolliver and McMillan each got run over by an inside linebacker during the game, blitzing, and they did not look good at all from that perspective. But as runners, they look good, and I don't think McMillan had a target, but I think Tolliver caught 2 balls and had a few yards there.
Yeah, another situation where because of injuries and veterans resting, these guys got a lot of run and felt like Rando, I think, had a pressure he allowed look like on one pass block too. To me, that was the area I was honestly maybe most curious to see him in. I was probably more excited to see him run, but I was most curious to see how he was going to look in pass pro because
Yeah.
that is going to be his quickest and best path to playing time early in his Ravens career and not quite there yet. He's obviously he's got the size for it, and that's what Keaton Mitchell was missing last year. But just getting to see him run a little bit, just never really felt like any of them got into much of a rhythm. None of them were really able to find that much space and break anything off. It was just kind of a slog. It felt like for all three of those backs.
Yeah, and it's still not bad in terms of success rate, I don't think. They had some first down runs. They ran the ball right down the throat of the Eagles when they knew it was coming. Particularly, I mean, the last drive, they what, a 6-yard gain, an 8-yard gain, and then the game was over. I mean, the Eagles knew exactly what was coming at that point. So, it's I think they did a fine job of running the football. They did an even better job, obviously, of passing it. I don't think there's any surprises in that running back group, by the way. And I think Ward, effectively, that signing is probably one to try and get them through the preseason. So they want a guy at a minimum salary that they can help them take some snaps, get him through the preseason. Hopefully, he doesn't get hurt, and he'll build up a little bit of tape. Hopefully from that as well. Tolliver and McMillan. I mean, one of them there's probably room for in the practice squad, assuming Ali is not the guy on the practice squad.
Right, and again, not knowing what the deal is with his injury, and even thinking ahead, is this an IR placement scenario? And he did kind of, even if it's kind of a phantom IR placement scenario, like the Ravens have been known to do every now and again. Could this be a situation in which case one of Tal Tolliver and McMillan you'd have to expect would be on the practice squad?
Right. I'm going to say this: if they try and make an 8-week IR for a midseason replacement out of Ali, which is they have 2 spots to do that now that are basically replace the handshake deal, and then they can use handshakes in addition to that. Although the Ravens, honestly, you look up and down this roster, there's almost nobody who it fits the handshake criteria. That's the problem.
There's one. It's John Jenkins. He's the only one.
But John Jenkins has $350 in guaranteed money, and
Yes.
and so
Does he?
they. Yeah, he does because they save 1.66 million if they cut him, and I think he's actually a cut risk. Actual not making the team cut risk because they want to keep saying Okoye or something. So they have, I talked about this a little bit on the defensive pod yesterday, but Jenkins, his spot could be up for grabs. I think that Washington is not sure of a spot. In Washington's case, they probably would try, they almost have to keep him if they can't trade him, but they'll try very hard to trade him, would be my guess. And they really want that roster spot. So what they've done is they've basically mitigated the risk of the preseason by having him around in terms of, hey, can all our defensive line go? Is our depth even going to hold up? Then we might need Washington. Or if we have some of these young players shine, and now it looks like some of that's happening because Benny played well. I thought Peebles played well. Okoye looked big in the game. They have 3 young guys. They'd probably like to keep all of them on the roster if they had the spots. They don't have the spots. They might not have the spots for even one of them is the problem. But you could replace Jenkins with Okoye, and you could replace Washington if you trade him with either Benny or Peebles. So, or you could carry 6 defensive linemen, which you've talked about. I just don't believe the Ravens are going to do that. It would be a big departure. And I know it's new coaching, but it's still Eric DeCosta, and he's going to want to manage the roster in the way he sees fit.
Yeah, I think the defensive line or defensive back are the 2 places why I think there could be 26 defenders. But not to get too far off topic, over to the tight end room. Nothing super surprising here, I would say. Obviously, Andrews, Smythe, him resting tells me that he is going to have a really substantial early season role as a run blocker, probably the entire season as a run blocker. It was interesting to hear. I can't remember now who it was specifically. You might when I say it. Someone compared Durham Smythe to Patrick Ricard in one of the press conferences this week, and I can't remember who it was. I think it might have been one of the tight ends, might have been Josh Cuevas. And obviously, the comparison is not he's a 300-pound fullback, but the comparison is how the Ravens see him as a blocker and using him as kind of a movable blocker, a versatile piece, the way that they use Ricard, and they were able to use him in a bunch of different ways, bunch of different alignments, different types of blocks they asked him to hit. So it almost feels like they're expecting Durham Smythe to, again, not be Patrick Ricard to be a 300-pound fullback, but fill that kind of featured blocker-esque role that Ricard has had in past seasons.
I mean, they do have like two guys who kind of fit that mold, if you want to call Smythe one, but Scott is also one, and he's really more in the role. He's slimmed down dramatically this year. He probably weighs 260, 265 right now, and he's out catching ball out of the backfield. So he's very un-Ricard like in that backer. We saw Ricard run any number of flat routes in his career with the Ravens that basically were, balls he caught at the line of scrimmage and then looked for a fearful defender to run over. They're just with Scott. I think he's actually has the potential to catch the ball down the field 8 yards if you needed him to. What he ran actually was a very Ricard-esque route in this game where he had, I think, 1+7 or something on the route, but still nice to see him get in there and catch the ball. We've seen him catch the ball, maybe 6-7 times in camp over the course of 2.5 weeks so far.
Yeah, I feel like I've seen the drops reduce from last year to the spring to training camp as well, which was a little bit of an issue before. So practice squad guy probably at best still.
Right. We have the tech to get food delivered in 15 minutes, but we all have horror stories about buying tickets. The Game Time app gives fans the advantage. Get amazing tickets in just a few taps. Fees are included, so what you see is what you pay. And the Game Time guarantee means authentic tickets at the best price every time. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets to concerts, sports, comedy, and more with Game Time. Download the Game Time app and create an account for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply.
All right, we're kind of bearing the lead here because Anderson Smythe sat out and Matt Hibner was putting the players together there. Matt Hibner had a great game, was one of the real stars for the Ravens. And one of the problems that I noted in camp, well, there are two big ones. One is wasn't holding onto the football at nearly the rate you'd expect. And that's a two-part thing. He had some drops, but he also was bobbling balls and double catching them, which was costing him the act. And the other thing he was doing was he's catching all short balls. Everything was, 7-on-7. He was in the middle of the field in front of defenders. 11-on-11, he's catching flat route after flat route. And, that's just not what you want to see out of your big, vertical seam challenging across the middle between L2 and L3 tight end that's supposed to change your offense some. He's one of your flex guys. And then he gets free down the left sideline, and Tyler Huntley hit him for the 29-yard play, which is a thing of beauty. And one of the only times he's been behind, it probably is the only time he's been behind the defense all summer.
Yeah, it's been a lot of short, intermediate outs, flats, sit routes for the tight ends. It's part of, I think, the reason that there has been concern about the tight ends is just how bland the offerings have been from them. And that's, in some ways, it's not even really, their fault. It's what they're, being coached, being coordinated to do, play call and all that. With Hibner, I think, and I noticed this in practice last week, and obviously it showed up at the game, is this is a guy who needs to be on the move, and you got to hit him in stride for him to use that athleticism. His conversion from catching and turning into a ball carrier looking for yak, just not a real natural thing for him yet. I think it's something he's going to get better at. He has the natural athleticism to do it. He just doesn't have the feel for it yet. But when you get him on the move, as the Ravens did on Saturday night, you could tell that this is a guy who's able to catch the ball in stride and keep moving. He has the acceleration, he has the agility to make a move in space, and obviously big enough to shake off a defender too. And so it was really, really just excited to see him get used in a way that I thought was more befitting his skill set.
Yeah, maybe a guy that can help the Ravens on extended plays too. He's got some speed, got some ability maybe to make space to find it. I think he'll probably have a pretty big catch radius. Now, nobody's got Jacoby Lane's catch radius, but I think, or probably Mark Andrews, but he could be a guy who has pretty good catch radius for a tight end that you see, Jackson could put up the ball to a general area when in trouble and make a play. And that's all he really ever wanted from Isaiah Likely. Well, it's not everything, but it was a big part of what he got from Isaiah Likely.
Yeah, and I felt that Hibner was fine as a run blocker, nothing spectacular, but he's not, obviously he's not Smythe. he's not the guy, I really want out there clearing the way for Derrick Henry and Lamar Jackson quite yet. I think he only had, looking at PFF right now, he had 2 pass blocking snaps, so not really much to take away from in terms of that. But I will say after the game, just having that welcome to the NFL moment be a positive one. A lot of guys, it's a negative one, but this one is like, hey, I made it. So it was kind of cool to hear him. He said he blacked out after the play. It looked like on the sidelines he headbutted Mark Andrews. No, Andrews wasn't wearing a helmet, and there's little things like that you see from a rookie. That's like, okay, he got to show the skill set, the strength of his game, and so you can see him loosen up and feel like he's arrived a little bit more. So definitely felt that for him on Saturday night.
He said he has a faulty memory on the field, it seems sometimes. He came to the podium the other day and he had this big lash across his neck, and people asked, I think it was one of the female reporters asked him about it actually, and he couldn't remember where it happened. He had a couple ideas, but he didn't know exactly where it happened. I think I'd know. Okay. Josh Cuevas got in there for 36 snaps. He actually led the tight ends in snaps. But it wasn't a great day for him. His only catch was an 11-yard play, but which seems good. But it was a 9+2 on 3rd and 11, where the underneath zone was 10, 11 yards off the ball. And it wasn't anything that you'd write home about or you'd save in the video that you want to show your grandkids. Just a fairly average night, I thought, for Cuevas, and one where he wasn't certainly one of the stars. One of the big things about this game was, of the players they drafted in April, 8 of the 11 players made a highlight play in this game. 8 of the 11. And I can't count Cuevas in that group. The 11-yard throw is just, it doesn't meet the minimum standard for me.
Yeah, and this is honestly really what we've seen from him in camp. Has not really been spectacular. Has struggled, really felt like he's struggled with drops at times. That has improved, I think, over the course of camp, but not in a super significant way. He's not making a lot of tough contested catches. Again, this is a function of how the tight ends are being used. I think it's worth noting. But this is a guy that, could be a healthy scratch on game days to be as a rookie. I just don't see really much of a role for him, and not a guy I'm expecting to really shine on special teams either, just given his athleticism, his size. So
if you only have 3 tight ends active on game day, you lose your ability to play 13 with 1 injury. And I think this is a place where I think you just take the risk and you have it the next week. You have Cuevas available again the next week if Smythe goes down or whatever. And you might have Scott back on the roster at that point if a Smythe were to go down for multiple weeks.
Yeah, and even if you were dealing with the way you're talking about Scott, it's not impossible to me that the Ravens could look at what Scott brings as a blocker and say we would rather have the 3 other tight ends and Scott instead of Cuevas active on game days, even if Scott's being activated from the practice squad. So yeah, and this is, tight end's a tough position to adjust to. It's a tough position to adjust to, especially in Baltimore where blocking is king, and Cuevas and Hibner, Hibner, very, very different usage in college than what he's going to see here in the NFL. And so inline blocking is going to be a huge part of his improvements and getting and carving out a consistent role and really his long-term future. Cuevas is in kind of a similar boat. To me, just really needs to work on just getting back down to the fundamentals of blocking and kind of rebuilding up his abilities in that respect. And, just as a receiver, he just doesn't bring a ton to the table. And so he is a guy who's going to need to become a solid blocker to carve out his role. Yeah,
no, completely agree. And that's obviously going to be a battle for him. Let's move on to the wide receiver position. I'm sure it's something everybody wants to hear about, or most people want to hear about. They rested Bateman and Flowers. I don't think there's any question about the number 1 and number 2 receivers on this team. But then the next 3 guys all came in at the same time. They basically all started, and that was Walker, Lane, and Wester. And they all got good opportunities to play early with Huntley, and in some cases play with Fagnano a little bit. In fact, in all cases, they got to go on and play with Fagnano a little bit. But really impressive games from 2 of those 3 guys. Wester let's start with him because it's the easiest. He was targeted 3 times. He actually made a very good play reaching back for the ball that I think denied the Eagles an interception. It looked to me like Thomas was tracking the ball behind him. He was going in for he knew he was going to have to go low. He's on the sideline. He was tracking the ball from the interception, much as the way Longer Beam was on the ball, like a tip by Silas Walters. and he tipped the ball. Unfortunately, the ball fell incomplete. But he had 3 targets and no catches. Honestly, a victim in a lot of ways of some inaccuracy when he was in there.
That, and I think it's feeling more and more like his roster spot is safe. I think Surratt's fumble is certainly not something that's going to help. I know we're going to get more to him in a second, but that's certainly not something that's going to help his eyes as a returner. I know it came on offense, but it's certainly not going to help his case as a returner. And the Ravens just don't really have another natural returner like Wester. And so I think his lack of usage on Saturday night was an indication that he pretty much has this roster spot locked in. There was maybe some question earlier on. It always felt like he had the wide receiver position and someone had to come and take it from him. Just doesn't seem like it's going to do that now, especially with Surratt and Lane performing so well as, the more offensive playmakers ahead of him. There isn't the feeling of, oh, okay, well, like if we have some undrafted, some young receiver comes in, shows us a lot on offense, maybe he threatens Wester. The Ravens have that in their draft picks. They're not going to look to bump Wester now, I don't think.
Yeah, I think that's a valid point. I don't think there was any danger to the top 6. I think this is one of the most locked in groups of wide receivers I've ever seen the Ravens have. And, we've gone through this whole camp, and there hasn't been a camp darling wide receiver at all. There are a couple of people talking about Guillory, but not in terms of making the team. It's about, he'd be good at the top of the practice squad. And, people are talking about Jacoby Lane, certainly. They hadn't really been talking about Surratt until this last game here. But there really isn't a camp darling. And almost every year there's that one wide receiver that everybody says, okay, can't leave him off the team. Kind of thing. There's not a guy like that this year.
Jacoby Lane has sucked up all the attention, all the love in Baltimore. Everyone is just so excited for him. And it's also representative of, where the Ravens are. The fact that they have 2 starting wide receivers, one excellent Pro Bowl caliber wide receiver, another who I still believe in. I know Rashad Bateman is not the most popular among Ravens fans, but a guy who I still think is a solid wide receiver too in this league, especially at his price point. And the fact that we are not scouring the dregs of our undrafted talent in hope for an impact receiver, I think is just a really positive sign for where the starters are and the fact that EDC has maybe finally hit on a couple of these receivers here.
Yeah, hopefully this isn't a year at any point where the Ravens consider bringing in a veteran receiver. So, by the way, all the people, you wanted Stephon Diggs here, boy, what a mistake that would have been. What a freaking mistake that would have been to bring him in with this unit of wide receivers ahead of him. It would have been a big mistake. And the people who all want Deontay Johnson here or, other players like that, a 3-year retired Dez Bryant.
Dez Bryant.
I've lost his name for a second, but Dez Bryant. All of the things that people have wanted over the years of these washed up wide receivers. It's much better if you can draft them and obviously get the value out of them on their first contract. And the Ravens have got that, I think, right now, and really need to flex this opportunity with these guys. And all 3 of them look like they're going to deserve snaps, and they want to get these guys between the 3 of them a number of targets that might be similar to maybe Flowers or even maybe a little more between the 3 of them.
Say that one more time.
So I'm saying if you had Flowers 140 targets maybe total, I think it's actually going to be a little less than that. Then you'd have the 3 of them would total about that many or maybe a little more.
Yes, I agree. And I think that what you're seeing is that this is a group that can do multiple things. I felt like coming into the season, there was I was a little concerned about Surratt and Lane and Walker carving out specific roles, becoming a little too predictable and limited in how they're contributing. But if you look on Saturday night, it was a lot of different ways that those 3 guys were contributing to the offense.
Yeah. And I thought, what we saw in this game in particular, and I could go into this in the second part, but I'll just go into here in terms of Walker in particular, was that this was a guy who's running some of the complementary routes that he won't run during the regular season. Campy actually has been running tons of deep routes, and the quarterbacks have been consistently underthrowing him, and it's just made him look a lot less than Lane in camp. I don't think he's had a worse camp at all. I think he's had a great camp himself. Been very good about that. One thing, I'm not crazy about the way he carries it around after he gets a deep ball that's underthrown, but But I think he's gotten open deep, and that's really been very cool. And hopefully the quarterbacks will get it dialed in with him in terms of finding the spot or figuring out how to do that right. In this game, he didn't have any deep routes that he ran, but he ran some complementary routes, some crossings, some comebacks. He had a dig. He had just a sit down route in the middle, about 4 yards past the line of scrimmage. It was not a big deal, but Walker needs to have these other routes in order to exploit the value at the top of the stem of a cornerback not knowing, what he needs to do. So he needs to have some other things that go with that.
100%. I think that has been something I've watched very closely in camp, is him diversifying his route tree and using his athleticism in more ways than just going vertically. I think he's probably the best player on the team right now in terms of taking a crosser and turning the corner upfield. Like, he's taken a bunch of, relatively short drag routes and just burns whoever's behind him in coverage and turns upfield for a big gain. And you see, like, okay, this is a guy who's there's more than one way to use his size and his athleticism than just on the vertical deep balls that he is very good at, is going to be a part of his diet this year. But to get on the field in the NFL, you got to have a more diversified route tree.
So you made a great point just then about he's a guy who can take a ball where he catches the ball coming across the field and then find the place to turn that up vertically. He's been very good at that, but he hasn't had a tremendous number of opportunities. In this game, he got a low ball, had to go down and get it on that, 15 yards or so play he made. And by comparison, Jacoby Lane got a beautiful, shoulder high ball to catch where he easily turned the corner and both outraced and outmuscled the two defenders to get into the end zone there. I mean, right there is a huge difference. I mean, Walker needed a ball right then. Probably you might have had 10 extra yards, or you might have had 35 extra yards in terms of where he caught that ball crossing and the potential for a much bigger gain. So sometimes it's a little bit about the quarterback there. And Surratt, I thought he did pretty well after the catch as well. He had most of his throws were coming back and kind of going low for the football, which I thought that's good. He needs to be able to do that, particularly when you're more of a closely guarded contested catch receiver. You need to be able to go low and have something to differentiate yourself in terms of where you can catch a ball around your frame. Jacoby Lane, it's kind of anywhere, but I think for Surratt, it's going to be mostly low that he gets the ball. But he did, he made a guy miss on the left sideline. I think he made a guy miss on the fumble catch as well,
Okay.
But unfortunately, he made a guy miss, and they didn't.
I'm sure you felt the same way watching that as I did, Ken. I was sitting next to Kevin Richardson, and we both kind of said at the same time, that ball is coming out. Secure that ball. Something of that nature, focused on the fact that the football is exposed. And former Raven, Sean Wade, came in, punched it out from Surratt. Said after the game that, everyone was coming to pick him up. Teammates, veterans, and rookies alike, coaches. Coming to pick him up and make sure he knew that he, still put together a really, really solid game. I think the yards after the catch juice is something that flashed on his film, but because of his athleticism, you really wonder how much is that going to be able to translate to the NFL when you're playing all of the athletes to the highest caliber. And it was there. He showed that juice. And so, it's going to be interesting to see, is he's probably right now the healthy scratch on game days if you're going to have one in that wide receiver room. Surratt is, just because, Walker's got the experience and seems to be carving out a role. And obviously Lane has been the darling, but Surratt clearly has something to offer this offense. And so it'll be really interesting to see, it's been a theme all summer. How are they going to, figure out these roles in the wide receiver room? And what's interesting is I don't know that we really got answers on Saturday night so much as reason to be intrigued and excited about all three of those guys.
Yeah, I mean, and that's fine. We don't need an answer on this.
Yeah.
We can take the answer from the coaches 90 minutes before the first game. Literally, I'm happy learning then who's going to sit. I'm 75 or 90% sure that you sit a wide receiver out of this group. Wester obviously has a role, so he has to be there on game day. I guess there'd be some team you might think, boy, we want to run 10 personnel or something. We want to make sure we protect our ability to do that. And maybe they'd want to have Surratt then. But and then if you decide to do that, Surratt replaces Wester for a week as your return guy. So it could even work out from that perspective. I'm not expecting them, by the way, to do anything silly like that, but it's possible. Let's keep going a little bit because we're running a little bit behind now, but it's always great organic discussion. We had Guillory and Wade. Guillory and Wade come in the game with Surratt, but Guillory made some nice plays in this game. Deserves a spot. Probably deserves to be playing somewhere in the NFL based on what he's done. But I think he's a great top of practice squad fit for the Ravens if needed.
Yeah, agreed. A guy who was, I think, had a pretty good camp last year too, if I remember correctly, as his connection with, I forget which quarterback was throwing the ball to him a lot last year, but he had, I felt like a good camp last year. Has had a good camp this year. Just a guy who's just not bring anything that's different and really stands out in his skill set. But it's just a high quality player, the kind of guy that, mid-season the Ravens suddenly need to bring up a fifth wide receiver from the practice squad. He's a guy that could do it. Wade just is not turning into that gadget, really dynamic athletic threat that people were hoping. Doesn't really seem to be, certainly in practice is not flashing as a receiver. Did he even get any? I don't even know if he got any returning opportunities in the game. But
yeah, he returned the last punt of theirs.
Okay, so so he returned that returns the last punt, but just to me, just hasn't shown the kind of flash and juice that you're expecting, and really a guy that size needs to show if he's gonna get onto a roster at some point. So again, a guy who's just, I think, stuck on the practice squad, and I just wouldn't. Looking at the rest of the Ravens' depth at wide receiver, I could see them preferring to keep Chris Moore to Dayton Wade on the practice squad, just as an example.
It's possible. I think Wade is a 1-for-1 replacement for Wester if something were to happen. I think that's why they might keep him there. But the Ravens have had the last couple of years, they've had a lot of veteran receivers hanging around on the practice squad. Sims and Miller and Kirkwood, all these guys who basically were really fairly long in the tooth for an NFL practice squad and still hanging around trying to get playing time with the Ravens. And the Ravens, at times they were calling them up. They lost Zay Flowers for a playoff game. They had Sims they had in there. And it's just sometimes they've had to need this version of the Ravens. I hope it never comes to that. I really hope it doesn't, because they'll have lost quality if it does. Let's move on a little bit, talk about Moore and Johnson. Now, Chris Moore, you just mentioned him here. 33 years old back. I think he's a 3 elevation guy from the Ravens practice squad. I think that's where he ends up. Any different view for him this year? He could end up being the 6th guy if there were injuries, but
yeah, when the Ravens signed him, the thought was, okay, maybe an all-purpose special teams guy that they prefer. Preferring him, his ability to contribute in all phases of special teams as opposed to just a returner. He broke off a return in practice the other day as well, and does have experience as a returner. So and is just like you talk about these veterans, he's the kind of guy that they like. He's a real lunch pail guy, special teams, run blocker, vet, has been in a bunch of different systems. And it has put up some yards as a receiver, certainly more than I was expecting in the last couple of years of his career at this juncture. But, just looking at the way the rest of this wide receiver room is played out, practice squad at best.
Yeah. All right. I'm in the same spot on there. Cornelius Johnson, very unfortunate drop at the end of the game on a very pretty throw by Reed that was out there on the left sideline. And it looked like he might have had yards after the catch. Maybe not, but obviously we never got to find out because he dropped the football. And then he got bailed out by a off-ball defensive holding, because the defensive holding was on Bram, who was the last guy to enter the game, and not on Johnson at all. So tough game for Johnson. Bram, that was the contribution he made in the game, was that defensive hold. He was not otherwise targeted.
Yeah, not really a whole lot to say about these guys. Hasn't been a whole lot to say about them in camp. Pretty much camp bodies. I think that, again, the fact that none of these guys are being really looked at really closely. So, what can this guy bring? Can this guy do something? Is just a much better sign for the health of the Ravens wide receiver room up higher on the depth chart than anything else.
Yeah. All right. We'll talk about the offensive line and how they came into this game. They rested Stanley, Rosengarten, and Simpson. Simpson was just due to injury. I think in looking at this, I think Simpson should have rested anyway. He's been in the league a number of years. I think he would have, if healthy, rested. He may have even been healthy enough to go, and he rested him anyway. And we saw 2 guys who are potential starters in Pinter and Ioane. actually get out there. Pinter, we talked a little bit about in terms of he had the holding call when he talked to the center group. Ioane had a mixed night, honestly, and I know a lot of people. There's some great highlights. There's some great physicality in there, and there's a couple of really nice stunt handoffs that he was involved in that I thought were good. There's also one thing I wanted to talk about in here that was one of the coolest things about Ioane, but I want to give you a chance to respond first, and then I'll bring up my point.
Agree with you about Simpson resting. Ioane, I think part of it was just getting a chance to see him hit some dudes on a very primal level for Ravens fans who have been begging for guard play and begging for more of an edge along the offensive line. Seeing that erupt from him so quickly was, maybe I'm exaggerating a little bit here, but just as important as pretty much anything else he could do on the night. I mean, there's really no question about a starting job. Obviously, you want to see him succeed, but I think getting that moment of, okay, this is as advertised. This is the guy we drafted. He's doing the things we drafted him for. Is just a real kind of checkbox moment for the preseason, and to an extent, the preseason is a lot of checking boxes.
Right. Okay, so the Ravens started Lichtenhan at right tackle. We're not going to talk about him just yet, but Lichtenhan at right tackle, he played the entire game, which was really nice, and I thought he played pretty well in general. But while Ioane was in there, on the second drive, Ioane, I'm sure most people saw this either on the broadcast or definitely if you're at the stadium, because they replayed it a couple times at the stadium. They showed a bodacious help block. So to describe what a help block is, there's a guard bubble over the right side, meaning there's nobody directly opposite Ioane for him to block. Lichtenhan had an opponent that was, and Lichtenhan had more or less swallowed up his bull rush at that point, but was maybe giving a little bit of ground. So Ioane's job then is to process from inside out. So he looks, first of all, is there anybody coming from level 2? Is anybody crossing the face of the center that I need to take care of because my blocking responsibilities go from inside out? And then his last thing is to go take care of a help block for Lichtenhan. And first of all, he went through that processing pretty quickly, which is good because we've seen guards who didn't go through that processing pretty quickly, whose names rhyme with shillelagh. Okay, and we
real subtle.
Yes. He went over and absolutely drilled that player. And I don't have in my mind who it is right now. It's in my article, by the way. But here's the really cool part. If you look back then to flattened him, knocked him on the ground. I think it's number 17, by the way. But the very first drive of the game, he's in this exact same position. The guard bubble is on that side. He processes inside. He goes over and he just kind of taps the guy. Same guy, same opportunity. Football does not have good control groups, but this is one case where there's a perfect 1-for-1 control group. And it's very clear to me, and this is one of the ways in which you can see the fingerprints all over the side, that Ledford probably grabbed him by the collar and had a conversation with him about what the hell are you doing out there? You're just tapping the guy. Go knock him into left field. Let's see some physicality. And he went out there on the second drive, and it was completely different. And I wouldn't be surprised if there were other elements of physicality that were there based on a conversation. But if that conversation did not occur, first of all, it should have, and second of all, it might have been the number 2 guy instead of Ledford who had the conversation. But boy, what a absolute clear out on that second help block.
Yeah, and this is the Ledford influence, right? And
yeah.
The combination of like very technique driven coaching that he has, but also his ability to tap into pure speed and physicality. And, Adam Randall had in the post-game locker room, Adam Randall had a hat that said speed off the ball, which is, the offensive line's mantra. And, you see that in play. You saw that in play multiple times.
Yeah. All right. So we got Pinter and Ioane in for a little bit. Ioane, some positives, some negatives. So there's certainly it was not a perfect night for him by any stretch, but it was great to see that physicality. Extended starters were there as well. That Vincent, who played 60-some snaps, I believe. Jones, who was in for the same set of snaps as Vincent was, and then Lichtenhan, who played the entire game. We talked about him a little bit. Emory Jones really struggled on that first drive. Terrible, terrible first drive for him. And in fact, he had 3 consecutive plays where he allowed some sort of pressure event. I think it was 2/3 of a quarterback hit, half a sack, and a full sack on those 3 consecutive plays. So really ugly, three play set for them. But he really settled down when he moved back to right guard. And I almost wonder, is he only meant to play the right side? And I thought originally it might have been the fact that the Eagles took some starters out of the game after the first or second drive. Not the case at all, really. They played rotationally pretty much the same way the Ravens did, same guys playing all through the night. And they almost had to, given the fact that the Ravens ran all those snaps.
Yeah, Jones obviously played right tackle almost exclusively at LSU. Was thought to be a guard coming to the Ravens, injury rookie year, etc. Has never really gotten a chance to settle in, and we've seen this with guys who move around the offensive line and don't get a chance to settle at one spot. It's interesting. Jones. Now I'm trying to remember, and I can't off the top of my head which side he's been working on primarily in practice.
Oh,
but,
right side
like
primarily.
You said,
yeah,
right, and so that's just seems to be where he's more comfortable. But the issue with that is then you have to make sure you have a dedicated left guard backup, which theoretically would keep Andrew Voorhees on this roster. Even though I think that the renegotiated contract with guarantees has already done that, that does put him. You wonder if that puts him at left guard 2 as the top left guard backup, and Jones is only backing up right guard.
Yes, I think I would probably see that as the way they go. The Ravens like to make 1-for-1 moves where nobody has to move. Now they could obviously just have Jones jump in, but then that'd leave him bare at 2 spots on the right side. I kind of feel like Emery is the backup at right guard and right tackle. We've seen Vincent get a swing opportunity. There, Vincent is much more of a natural left tackle. He's got the feet for it. He's got the length for it. It's almost like if you use him at right tackle, you're almost taking a risk you don't want to with your only backup left tackle. I don't think Rosengarten would be a good fit at all moving over there. And so it's really, you'd rather have Emory Jones be your backup right tackle, all things being equal. And I guess possibly number 2, which we have to talk about after this, is Lichtenhan a guy you have at the top of the practice squad in case there's a tackle injury? And yeah, you have to find somebody. It's probably Jones to get you through a game, but maybe Lichtenhan is the guy that becomes the right tackle after an injury occurs to Rosengarten.
Yeah, and Lichtenhan played really well. I know you're going to get more into the details of everyone's performance, but the fact that he was asked to come in, kind of similar to Fagnano, with this weird situation earlier in the week. Right tackle Kendall Lamb suddenly retiring, the second veteran Ravens offensive tackle to decide that didn't want to play 2 weeks, didn't want to play anymore 2 weeks after signing with the Ravens. You got to wonder what Dwayne Ledford's hazing rituals are in that offensive line room. But that's a joke, to be clear. But credit to him for going out there and playing, especially when the Ravens had such a lopsided snap count, which are a play count, which I know you're a big fan of, Ken. Going out and playing the entire game as he's a big guy. That is not the easiest thing to do when you've been rotating all summer. So a lot of credit to him, not just for doing that, but for looking really good, for looking really quite good, better than I felt like he has looked in practice.
Yes, I he's more ahead. I thought he was not a guy who really could help the team this year. I thought they had all the backups they needed to tackle. Now I'm feeling a little bit differently about whether Jones or Lichtenhan might be the multi-game solution there if you had an injury to Rosengarten occur. All right, we're going to go quickly through this. Gwynn and Voorhees came in. Gwynn we're going to talk about in the second show. Voorhees, I thought, really struggled for a lot of the night. A lot of difficulty, and in particular, I was really bothered by a late blitz pickup where he left it for a running back. Then the running back, of course, gets run over. That was one of McMillan or Tautala, and I can't remember which one it was on that play because they're getting steamrolled by the interior linebackers of the Eagles was so similar.
Honestly, not a ton to add there. Just really that the I guess I'm curious what the plan was earlier in the week before the Lamb retirement, and then how that may have shuffled things elsewhere on the line, and how they and why maybe they just decided let's just have Lichtenhan take the whole right tackle slate.
Yeah, they did. I just don't think there was anybody else to give it to. I mean, you could put Corey Bullock there. He played it in college.
That's what I was wondering.
Yeah. So I guess
but Minter said that he was only going to play guard and center. So clearly, again, that was in the plan going in.
Seems pretty secure to me that he's only going to play guard at this point, but we'll see. They have 5 guys who are in the center competition, at this point. Anyway, Pounds, Dawkins, Posick, Bullock got in on the final drive. We don't need to talk about them too much. I didn't think Pounds was bad, but Dawkins is a little bit out of position at left guard. Not much to say about Bullock in a short opportunity like this, other than I hope he gets more snaps because he's a guard center versatility guy.
Yeah, guard center and has tackle experience. And you think about, we're talking about in a pinch, get you through a game. But it really comes down to it. If you have 2 injuries along your offensive line, then a guy's that you're in a pinch. And so a guy who's going to be able to get you the end of a game like Bullock, who has at least some experience and knows what he's doing on some level out there, is important. This is also just a result of a guy who was injured for a bunch of the offseason. Right. And doesn't get a chance to really carve out a spot during spring practices, carve out a spot in training camp, and really has just been battling uphill this entire time.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll cut it here for the first half of the show. We'll come back. We're going to talk about the lack of exotic looks in this game. And I want to hear your thoughts about this, Nick, because I know you mentioned that, hey, we did see some exotic things, and there are a few. I'll agree, but I want to talk about that with you. But before we cut out, tell folks where they can talk football with you online.
You can find all of my written work at BaltimoreBeatdown.com, where I have all my Ravens coverage. And then on social media, on X, I am at Nik, N-I-K, Noseball. Feel free to hop on and ask me anything about the Ravens or football or movies or anything else, really.
He's a big movie fan. And I found out there's certain people at camp who could tell you what TV to watch, and there's certain people who could tell you what movies to watch. But for movies, I'm trusted Nick. He's just catching up to Killing Eve now in TV shows, which he's several years behind our current need. But great show, but several years behind. Anyway, really appreciate you coming on, Nick. Other folks out there, please use filmstudymailbag@gmail.com for your questions. We'd love to have them. I'll direct them to the appropriate show, and they won't get lost in that mailbag. So I appreciate you using that. Thanks again for all the loyal listeners, and we'll talk to you next time on Film Study. Okay.
One of the biggest challenges of earning a degree as a military veteran is transitioning your goals and experiences to your next phase in life. National University gets it. As a veteran-founded Yellow Ribbon School, they offer post-9/11 GI Bill acceptance, dedicated military support and advising services, and credit for your military experience. That's why 30% of their students are military affiliated. NU. Education that serves those who served.